1. So a couple years back. I think this was an ongoing thing from when I was about 15 to 16. A few years prior, I had gotten a new neighbor. She was an older lady, like much of my neighborhood, considering I lived with my grandma in a 50-plus community. She was very sweet at first. She also had the cutest little dog ever. Sweet little 3-legged chihuahua, who was friends with my dog. But that's not what you're here to read, I'm sure. Once I got into high school, she started to get a bit crazy. At first, it started out kinda tame. I was accused of stealing from her house. I could understand her accusation, really. I mean, I was the only teenager around, and you don't see many old people breaking into houses. The accusations were very odd, though, because she accused me of stealing dog treats and incense from her. The accusations got more and more absurd as time went on, with the last accusation being that I broke into her house and moved her furniture a little bit. This was the start of shit actually getting crazy. One day while I was out pulling weeds out of the garden, she sees me from out her front door and comes out. She starts screaming and cursing at me, threatening to call the cops on me, to stop going in her house, which I have never once been in even before when I was friends with the previous tenants. She then went on to say that if the police wouldn't do anything, that she would take care of me herself. At the time I figured she was just threatening to sue me because I think like a rational person. After about a week or two of hearing nothing from her or the police, like she threatened, my dad and grandma are wanting to go somewhere, so we all get in the car. I was the first one in the car and seated in the back seat, where the windows are tinted enough where you couldn't really make out if anyone was sitting back there or not. She apparently had seen my dad and grandma get in, though. My neighbor from across the street was a family friend, and she called my dad, telling him about having to call the cops on our crazy neighbor, because she heard her screaming for me from inside her house. She had walked out to see what was going on, just to see this crazy woman stalking around outside my house with a giant kitchen knife. She had apparently thought I was home alone at the time. She ended up being held for 72 hours under a psych evaluation, but was deemed fine. Once she came back, I wasn't allowed to be home alone anymore. Not long after she came home, though, she decided to be very nice and apologize to me, while my dad was with me. It didn't last long, though, because about a month later, the same old accusations started again. I think she learned to not look for me with a knife again, though, because she would just call me a bitch or cunt whenever we were outside at the same time, and if I was outside on my own, she would watch me from her windows. She even growled at me a couple times. Eventually, she was taken for another 72-hour psych evaluation for something I wasn't told about, and wasn't allowed to come back to the neighborhood. So, crazy neighbor lady who wanted me dead for stealing dog treats, let's not meet again. Edit. This wasn't a case of dementia, according to her children. She's bipolar and stopped taking her meds. 2. A little backstory. When I was 19, I lived with my mom in a ranch-style house on a road that backed up to a large field. On the other side was the main highway. About a half-mile down from me was a loony farmer, and about a mile on the other side from me was, pretty much, a crack house. I guess someone used to live there, but it was run down. I will say that the crackheads were pretty quiet. Other than those two houses, we were isolated. At the time, I was working full-time and going to school full-time. One of my classes ended at 10:30 p.m. I often wouldn't get home that day of the week until about 11:15-ish. I was driving home one night, and I noticed some guy walking down the road. He had a yellow shirt and track pants. I remember his outfit because it was stupid. It wasn't weird to see people walking down my road because of the whole crack house thing, but I instinctively looked over at him when I drove past. He turned and smiled and waved, which freaked me the fuck out. So I speed the half-mile home and pull into the driveway, weirded out. I made sure all the doors and windows were secure, and then sat on the couch to be a paranoid freak, and wait to make sure the dude walked past my house. Except he didn't. And there was another guy with him, dressed in darker clothes. They actually walked up my driveway and started playing around with my car, testing the handles and stuff. In my hurry, I forgot to grab my phone from the car, so I was kind of worried that's what they were after, until the guy in yellow started approaching my door. I'm freaking out. So I go and wake up my mom. She is bleary, and I'm trying to explain the situation when we both hear the doorknob turn very slowly. Good thing it was deadbolted. She got out of bed, walked to the door, and then Yellow Shirt knocked. I perched up on the couch so I could get a good look at him and his friend, still in the driveway. The porch light was on because of the sensor. "Yeah?" my mom said. "You dropped your wallet." I told my mom that I had my wallet, it was in my purse. So she calmly told him that she had her wallet, and it was too late to be knocking on people's doors. I remember perfectly what he said next, even though this was about 6 years ago. "Okay, I'm not a bad guy. Just so you know." We were all pretty still. No one moved, not even the guy at the door. Not even when the porch light went off. Then he tried the handle again. My mom told me to call the cops so she could get the gun, and I told her I didn't have my phone. So she walked to the kitchen to grab hers from the charger. She handed me the phone and walked to the bathroom. Stared out the window into the backyard. Then she went to her room to grab her Ruger. I was talking to the cops and explaining the situation, all while watching the two guys, explaining that there were 2 suspicious guys at our door, when my mom came back out and said, "One in our backyard too," which explained why she had looked out the bathroom window. She glimpsed him from the kitchen and went to get a more discreet look. My mom walked back over to the door with her gun and loudly said, "If he tries the handle again, I'm just going to open the door and shoot him." Fuck knows why she said that instead of waiting for the cops to arrive, but the guys took off down the road. I told her, and she rushed to the bathroom where the guy, apparently in the backyard, saw his friends running down the road and sprinted off too. They were going in the direction of the crack house. The cops searched our house and our yard and went to the drug house where they found 5 dudes hanging around. One was the yellow shirt guy, and I'm assuming his friends were with him. They did get arrested, and nothing weird like that ever happened again. But I was on edge for a while. I still make sure the doors are locked at all times every day, even though I live in a much nicer area now. Anyway, sorry it was a bit anticlimactic. The dudes got caught. Either way, weird guys who told me you found my wallet. Let's not meet. 3. This was a few years ago. I got married last year, and this takes place at my in-laws' house, but before I married my husband. We get together routinely on Sundays at his parents' house, with the rest of his siblings and their children. It's been a tradition for as long as I've been with him, which is over 7 years now. This was in the summer, and we live in a place where summers get very hot. Sometimes it can peak at 120 or above. Naturally, during this time many of us try to save money and leave our doors open to just the screens, as well as our windows. This is why this particular encounter happened. As if we hadn't had the front door open to just the screen, I don't think this girl would have had the nerve to persist by banging on the door or ringing the bell. Or maybe she would have. I don't know. Anyway, we were just getting ready to plate up for dinner at this time, so it had to have been between 4:30 p.m. and 6 p.m. My mother-in-law had made the call to all of us a few minutes previously, There's a lot of us, let me say. My husband is the youngest sibling. He has 3 older sisters who all have significant others, and his oldest sister has 3 daughters, who will become more important in a second. But it wasn't my turn yet. The nieces had been plating first. I say this because they were in a small dining room putting their plates down to begin eating, and the dining room is right next to the front door. There's a huge window in the little dining area as well that opens directly out to the front lawn facing the street. Basically, if you moved from the front door about 3 steps, you would be directly in front of this dining room window. That's how close it is. Now, as I've said, I'm sitting still in the back of the living and family area, waiting for my turn to go to the kitchen and start plating up. So I'm on the opposite end of the house when this starts. I can hear high-pitched girl voices, but I'm not paying much attention because I'm doing something. I think I was studying at the time because I was getting ready to get my MA. But I don't remember specifically. I just know I was preoccupied with some school or bookwork, so it took me a few moments to realize that the voices I was hearing were very distressed sounding. I look up and see my now husband Daniel standing up, heading toward the kitchen, which is closer to the front of the house, opens up into the little dining area, where my father-in-law and one of my brother-in-laws are standing. He asks him what's going on, and brother-in-law tells him something low in response I can't hear. He turns to me and I motion for him to tell me what is going on. Daniel comes over and says, "There's a girl at the door. She's saying she needs help or something." At this point, my father-in-law has moved to the hallway, probably to station himself close to his bedroom in case he needs one of his multitudes of guns, all legal, he keeps there for emergencies. "What do you mean, what help? What's wrong with her?" I ask, and he shrugs basically, so I get up. "Where's the girls?" I ask him now, meaning our nieces, because I know they were the first to plate up, so they were likely close to the door. Daniel motions toward the dining room as expected. My sister-in-law Jane, mom of the nieces, comes out from the front and says, "Okay, well, I'm going to go back to eating dinner," in a sort of put-out voice, as if she's annoyed at the disturbance. While what she says kind of puts everyone at ease, I didn't feel right. I can see my father-in-law still tense next to the hallway, and my brother-in-law Samuel, the girl's father, isn't anywhere to be seen. The reason I mention this is because he's an old bare-knuckles boxer, 6'7" about, and at this time around 300 pounds, I'd say. And he's also a hugely macho and protective guy. I'm not sure if he's in the front of the house or the back, but I know that if I find him and see how he's reacting to the situation, that I'll know if it's serious or not. I start moving to the front and Daniel says, "Sarah, it's fine, just sit back down. Trevor," another brother-in-law, "and Mom are taking care of it." I had no idea what this meant at the time, but apparently they were debating then in the kitchen whether to call the cops. I don't listen to him and keep going, and I'm really glad I did, because I don't know what would have happened to my nieces if I hadn't gotten there. I walk into the front entryway and there's a girl I've never seen before standing inside the house. My youngest niece and oldest niece are in the dining area with her, and she's holding my oldest niece by the arms. She's nearly hysterical, rambling unintelligibly, and Karen, my oldest niece, is saying things to her like, it's okay, even though she looks very freaked out. I walk up to them and say, "Hello? What's going on?" I'm not sure why I was so calm, because inside I was really upset and wanted her to stop touching my niece immediately. But I said this very friendly-like. She turned to me immediately, and Karen, who I now realized was still concerned that this girl was actually in danger, tells me, "She's running from her boyfriend who hurt her. I let her in to get away from him." Karen is about 14 at this time, mind you, and she'd also been homeschooled her entire life up until that very year, where she finally started going to public school. So, she was very sheltered and trusting. When she told me this, I knew very potently that I wanted my nieces out of the room and that this girl needed to get the hell out of the house. The crazy girl, thank God, let go of my niece at this point and fixates on me. She begins telling me some very obviously made-up sob story about how her boyfriend just hit and beat her, and she ran away and was scared he was chasing her. She wasn't in any physical distress whatsoever, and her eyes were wild, bloodshot despite the fact that she's not crying. And she's got spit and a little foam at the corners of her mouth. When she grabs me, I look at Karen and say, "Karen, where's Mel?" This was her middle sister. Her youngest sister, Becky, was wide-eyed on the other side of the table at this point. "There with Graham," she said, pointing to the kitchen. And I don't look back because I don't want to let the girl out of my sight. "Can you take Becky and start helping everyone else plate up for dinner? We don't want it to get cold." This was a weird phrase, and I'd never said anything like that to her before, but it was the first thing out of my mouth that I could think of. The girls are very obedient of their family. We're very close. So she gets Becky and takes her into the kitchen immediately. The girl, this entire time, by the way, is rambling on at me about how she wasn't doing anything wrong, and she was petrified he would find her and beat her. But she's clearly lying. She's not scared in the right way, and I don't know how else to explain that, other than she was clearly not scared of a physical threat, but she was scared of something outside, as if she kept whipping her head around to look through the front door and the window often as she ranted. Also, a lot of her rants involved Jesus and begging forgiveness. She's grabbed my arms at this point. I don't want this to become an altercation, so rather than try and pull away from her, I try to move her with me into sitting in chairs at the table. Eventually, I get her to do this, and at this point Daniel shows up in my periphery. I shake my head at him, because I don't want him or anyone I know and love for that matter anywhere near what's going on. But all he does is mouth to me, "Do you hear that?" "Honey, can you repeat that?" I made it like I was talking to the girl. I have no idea what she said at that point, but I was really talking to Daniel. He motions very subtly to the door, then made a swirling motion above his head and mouthed, "Sirens." Then I could hear what he was talking about. There were sirens getting louder outside. I said something, basically asking her to repeat to me everything that had happened to her in detail, but I made a big show of being loud about it, like I was just as distressed and scared as her. I didn't want her to hear the sirens because I didn't want her to freak out. Bulging in her pocket was something that was shiny at the opening, and I knew it was a knife of some sort, even though I couldn't see exactly what it was. I just knew. So I kept her grip on my arms and gripped her back to keep her hands occupied. My father-in-law and Samuel at this point walk past us very fast out the front door, which disturbs the girl. She yells at them, asking what they're doing, and I get her attention back and say, "They're out there looking for your boyfriend. They want to make sure you're safe. They're going to keep him away from here." I literally just said those words without even thinking. She wasn't really happy still, but she sat back again and asked for a drink. I told her sure, and said something about someone already getting her one. I just wanted to keep her in her seat. I could see behind her out the front window that several police cars were outside at the curb, and my father-in-law and Samuel were talking to them. Daniel now passed us and went out the front door as well, which freaked the girl out again. Karen, at this point, had creeped back into the room somehow, and she came to the girl and said something like, "You don't have to worry, we will take care of you." The girl yelled back about wanting her drink and that she needed to use the restroom. She let go of my arms for the first time since I'd walked into the room and was moving toward Karen. So I gripped her very hard. At first she struggled, but she was so clearly on something that it was a very weak struggle. But she was trying to pull her arms toward her pocket where her knife was. "Karen, can you go check on her drink for me, please?" I said to Karen really loudly. She clearly had no idea what I was talking about, and so I said, "Honey, her drink. In the kitchen. I need you to go check on that right now." Again, the fact that she's such an obedient kid saved her, thank God, and she left again. The girl got very quiet now and finally actually started to cry. I could see Daniel, Samuel, and father-in-law still talking to the police, and my heart was beating really hard. I didn't understand why it was taking them so long. But in reality now I understand it was probably not a very long time. It just felt so long because of adrenaline. "He's gonna pay for this," the girl said suddenly, very clearly, and very calmly. She finally got her arms away from me, and she gripped her pocket. "Yes, he will," I said back to her, just instinct. She started panting really hard. "You guys aren't going to turn me in, are you?" she suddenly shrieked, and I think she was finally seeing the flashing lights of the cars from outside, reflecting on the walls and stuff. I asked her name really quickly, but she ignored me at first, and tried to stand back up. I grabbed her shoulders and asked again, and held her gaze until she sank back down and was crying again. "Helen," she told me. "Helen, I need you to please sit here with me for a minute," I said. But she tried to get back up suddenly again. "You're turning me in. I need to go. Please let me go." "Helen, you believe in Jesus, right?" I asked her suddenly, appealing to her crazy religious ranting from before. She looked at me and nodded really hard suddenly, sobbing hard. She plunked back down in her chair, and I said something like, "Would you please pray with me? I want to pray for you." This seemed to be the nicest thing anyone had ever said to her, and she broke down and grabbed my hands, and I could finally breathe again now that she wasn't holding her knife. I muttered a prayer that I don't even remember. I was rambling, basically. Some nonsense prayer to God, elongating it enough until the policeman finally walked through the front door. As they hauled her away from me, she looked at me with the saddest, almost repellent look in her eyes, like she'd finally given up the charade, and she knew she'd ruined our entire night, and actually kind of cared about it. According to the police, she just robbed one of the neighbors from a few blocks down, with a male as her partner. They'd broken into the home and started looting when the couple came home, so they held them at knife point and bluffed their way out of the house, and were literally just hanging out in the field next to the neighborhood, enjoying their loot, consisting of mostly alcohol to complement the other substance abuse, until they heard the sirens in the distance and they both freaked out, scattering. The police caught the guy first, and tracked her down based on his description of where she'd ran to. My family heard the sirens and rushed outside to flag them down, and that's the story. Crazy looter girl who crashed our Sunday family dinner. Let's not meet ever again. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to 3 True Scary Stories, episode 200 and... Well, it's been a while since I've done this. Episode 246. Okay, good news, bad news time. Good news is I made a video, so there we go, yay. Bad news is we are not anywhere close back to daily uploads. It's going to be sporadic. I'll try and do one next week, at least one next week. Even if I just need to record a story a day, we'll see where my throat's at, because I'm having a number of problems right now. One of them's there. Good news is, health-wise, my blood results came back. They were clear. I know some people have been curious. So I'm hoping it's just my usual problems flared up really badly, which should mean eventually everything will settle down and I'll recover. and I'll be back to doing daily videos eventually. It's just, it can be a long recovery sometimes. I mean, I was ill at the start of the year, and I was actually still recovering when I started working again at the start of the year, and that took months to recover properly. But anyway, I'm going to shut up now. There's no need to keep banging on about how sick I am. Hope you enjoyed the video. I will try and get, I'll try and get one out next week. I do have 2 chapters of Dracula I've already recorded. I did those before I got sick, and I'm hesitant to upload those because if I upload, it's chapters 1 and 2. If I do upload those, it could be ages before I continue it. But if you guys do want them, let me know in the comments, and I will upload, I'll maybe upload one on Sunday, and then maybe the other the following Sunday, so at least we've maybe got 2 videos in a week. And we'll see. So let me know, and thank you so much for all the kind comments. I can honestly say I had tears in my eyes reading some of them. You guys are so kind to me, and I appreciate all the love. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.